All right. Welcome back, everyone. As I mentioned, we're going to have our next speaker now, which is Marikita Solis. Okay, I hope I said that name correctly. Marikita is going to speak about the myth of the half system and why numbing emotion makes men weak. Okay, and for those of you that don't know her, she's a transformational coach who helps men remove the emotional mask and step into that courage, integrity, and authentic power. So, with that said, Marikita, go for it.
Thank you so much, AK. I'm excited to be here and I'm very touched emotionally. So I'll just want to say I'm going to really be an example of emotional regulation here with big emotions and big feelings. So y'all, first of all, thank you for everything you're doing. For everyone here, I really appreciate you all, your love and wisdom. So if we could just take a minute to have a little grounding exercise, I would really, I think for myself and for everyone here, if that would be all right. And I just invite you to close your eyes and just take some deep breaths, breathing down into your hips, down into your legs, and down into the soles of your feet, connecting with the wisdom of Mother Earth, all of the intelligence of life, and that wise space inside of you that is full of energy and full of potential. The one that doesn't need to know the answers, but is standing strong with courage and resilience. We're just calling on that energy in this space today, knowing that it's always there, it never leaves us. And just letting go of anything that could be blocking as we step in the full potential of this moment. And just breathing this in and saying, yes, and so it is, and so it shall be. Ah, well, thank you all. All right. Well, today I wanted to talk to you a little bit first about me, and this is my story and it's probably your story as well. And it's a story about a lie that I believed in, a blueprint of my life and the cost that followed with me um, going along with this lie. I operated for decades with self-hatred and not believing in myself and this I'm not enough syndrome that just was a constant cycle of I'm not enough and how am I going to prove that, right? And I was very successful in proving it, proving how I was, I mean, a great dumping ground for myself and I couldn't accomplish anything. I was driven by overwhelming emotions. Right. So I wasn't on the logical side. I wasn't shutting down the emotions. I was sitting in full emotional capacity and I wasn't in balance, right? So I was living in the half system. The half system is what we're talking about today, the myth of the half system. And I was in the emotional half system. So I learned that who I was fundamentally unacceptable. And as a little girl and a woman, I saw that I needed to put my emotions, I mean, my logic to the side, and I needed to really, yeah, forget about what I needed because everyone else's needs became more important. So who cares if it was logical that I was last in my own life? That didn't matter. And so I didn't think about that. I was just taught that I need to suppress this, my needs. So I shut down the logical side of myself and I failed immensely living in this half system. So I learned that I had to integrate logic and feeling. In fact, I have a Mr. Spock sitting right next to me, a sign, a poster that says logic. So I'm not going to forget. Do not operate solely on this feeling and emotion and don't abandon your logic. So I learned the balance, right? So for many men, it's the opposite. They're shutting down the feelings and the emotions. So and we most of us have operated from the same core wound that we have to shut down certain emotions to succeed, which means you're cutting parts of yourself off. You're cutting yourself in half like I did. So we've also been taught that strength is emotional suppression. Now, that in many cases means suppress the vulnerability, the fear, and the sadness because those are messy, weak, and dangerous. And this is what most men learn at an early age. This is their blueprint. You know, we can't show weakness. We can't cry. We can't um, we can't ask for help. So this, like I said, this starts in early life. Um, so the masculine ethic is this system that is it's really it is elevated by analysis, toughness, and detachment, right? And that's when you're really a man, when you've detached from others, when you've detached from yourself, and you're letting go of anything that's related to the eros, which is the principle of feeling and relatedness. Now, this kind of ethos creates that cultural environment, which we call the man box. Um, I meant to hit my timer, but I just did. so, um, so the man box teaches us that message that you're not good enough as you are, right? You need to contain your feelings and you need to get rid of all that messy feeling bit of it, that somatic self. And that somatic self is the part of you that lives in your body through feelings, sensations, and instincts. And many men have been taught to push that away. And so this is the part of your being that operates outside of that conscious logical awareness. So this somatic self communicates through a felt self. And in order to be accepted into the man group, boys are taught at a young age that you must shed that somatic self. Now, Dr. Judy Z. Chu's book and research affirms this, that their feelings are naturally strong, but they learn very quickly in kindergarten at that age of 4 and 5 that they need to, even starting at 3, they need to shut down those feelings, right? Your feelings are too big to be held. So you better learn to contain them because society is not going to allow that. You're going to be judged, right? And so as a little boy, internalizing this message, you had to cope. And you coped in an ingenious method. You created that false self, a false center, right? This false center, and I'm referring to this in my studies with Claire Zammit, she talks about the false power center, and as in contrast to your power center, right? This false center is fueled by superficial means, cars, houses, and then I mean this outside of self, right? And I've heard this in the discussions that we had with AK before, like what is going on outside of you to validate yourself. It's not your inner work where you validate yourself by your own values and your core beliefs. So this mask that you created in childhood, again, was ingenious. It protected you and you adapted that way. You were a powerful adapter and you successfully survived your childhood, which demanded this. But if you're still running on that half system, it is not serving you now because that system is suppressing your emotions and leaving you less capable of joy and genuine connection and relatedness with others. So as men, we must evolve from that half system to a full system, which is a path rooted in relatedness. Now that's coming together. And like I said before, these little boys, tiny little boys are learning this in kindergarten. I've got to detach. I've got to detach from others. I've got to be strong. I don't want to play with the girls. And I highly recommend this book. I don't know if you can see it now, but it's Judy Chu's When Boys Become Boys, because her research shows that in kindergarten is when they start detaching. So all right. So as men are very logical. Most of them, they're grounded in the masculine, which is very linear. 1 + 1 = 2. They solve problems. They analyze data, right? So when you apply this pure logic to emotional suppression, then there's a big flaw that is, I mean, immediately it shows up, and that's the half system blueprint. And the logical man's biggest mistake, which I see all the time, is trying to solve an emotional crisis like a math problem. Now, emotions can't be put in boxes and they can't be charted, and then relationships can't be solved like that. So many men think if I eliminate that fear and the sadness, all those messy emotions, I'll eliminate the problem. So they're trying to treat life as an equation that can be put on a scorecard and run it efficiently. It's not a flow chart though. Life is life is rich. We are humans full of emotions. We are feeling beings. We can't be put on a, a flow chart or any kind of checklist, right? So when you're running your life, it can't run efficiently when you ignore that data that's coming from your heart and your body, your intuition and your feeling and your senses. So we also have another big problem here. Men shutting down emotions and believing that they can selectively numb certain emotions. We can't just numb the part of the emotional spectrum. So if you're numbing feelings like shame, fear, and vulnerability, these messy, possibly uncomfortable emotions, your brain doesn't understand that just to shut those down, only those, it's going to shut down that other end of the spectrum, which is joy, enthusiasm, and gratitude, right? So, I mean, this is debilitating. Um, and when you're shutting down that somatic self inside of you, it's causing a toxic anxiety because I mean, who can live in that state? It's not sustainable when you're shutting down part of yourself. And that's just continual suffering, a loop of suffering, and you're abandoning yourself. You're not being an advocate for yourself and your feelings and your emotions. You're a tyrant to yourself. And that's the way I was. I was a tyrant, continually attacking myself. So, how can you relate to other people in work or in friendships or in romantic relationships if you haven't been able to feel your own emotions and regulate them and acknowledge them, allow them, and even just to hold them in your hand? Like I see this pain, right? I recognize it, I acknowledge it, but instead I'm pushing it down. So how is that going to work for you in your career? How are you going to inspire your team if your passion is flat? So if you are not allowing these emotions in their capacity, you're not developing empathy. And so how are you going to have that empathetic competence with clients that that you need to develop because of your own emotional channel being jammed? So, and also again, in romantic relationships where your partner is wanting depth, but you can't give it. It's a flat relationship. It's not authentic, right? So, and that's it. I see that all the time in relationships, these superficial relationships that don't have depth because the walls are up. We can't get involved in that messy emotions of life, but that's what life is. Life is emotional. So emotional flatness is what is lingering here, and then that creates a persistent sense of an inner void and that crushing loss of passion, right? That is what is being caused here when you're limiting yourself. So you traded that pain, that potential pain, and what you've got in exchange is guaranteed numbness, right? Is that logical? I would say not. I would say you're missing out on the joys of life. You're denying the world the beautiful expressiveness of who you are when you do this. You're denying the world of that and you're denying yourself of that, right? Um, so the half system is just going against all of nature. Not, you don't see the trees denying themselves. You don't see animals denying themselves. I look at my dog Louie and I say, "Thank you for being a full animal, right? With all sorts of emotions. Sometimes you nip me, but that's okay because you're telling me something, right?" So it's all good. So these childhood suppressed emotions don't disappear. They're just under pressure. And like plastic bottles that are under the asphalt, they start to build up that pressure, and that pressure is going to erupt. Those bottles are coming up out of that asphalt, and it comes up in destructive ways, and they're not predictable ways. That pressure is the shame, right? That's bottled up. The shame that something is wrong with you. You're not enough. I'm not enough. And I'm ashamed of that. And I need to hide, right? So when shame is repressed, you feel trapped. You feel powerless and isolated. You don't want to come out. And how is that serving your life? Logically, right? So you have it can be expressed in two different ways, right? You have a choice. And we talked, I mean, we heard this from our other wonderful speakers. You can express it with chaos or capacity, right? The power over or the power to. So is that emotional energy going to become a source of chaos or a source of transformation? And this is when self-awareness comes into play. So, power over, that can be expressed when this internal energy that's being pushed down, it's going to surface as being a dominator, right? And this develops. If you read the book that I was recommending, When Boys Become Boys, you'll see it in the mean team. There's a little group of boys, they're called the mean team. And Mike, the leader, uses that power over the boys to control his team. Now, you can see that he really loves the team, but he doesn't want that to come out too much. And also, what you learn is that Mike is using this power over so he is accepted. That's a false sense of security, right? Because that's the one way that he's accepted if he's the leader. So because he feels like they're not going to turn on him. It's okay for him to be nice to the little girls, but the other mean team boys better not be because playing with girls is not acceptable. So, power over is about dominance, control, and coercion. You can use it to make others or yourself do what you want them to do, regardless of their will. So, when you lack that internal control over your feelings that have been repressed, you become obsessed with that external control, right? And so it will come out, possibly in rage, blaming others, trying to attempt to manipulate a partner or a colleague to maintain order because you don't have the internal order inside of yourself. And this pushes people away and it's destructive in relationships. Now, it also shows up as the internal power over. And this is that constant internal attack of I'm not enough. And it's shame judging you. You're judging your flaws. Your mind is using your powerful mind, that wonderful logical mind as a man is using the toxic energy of shame to beat down that somatic self. And shame is a total system failure. It manifests as a toxic energy drain, and you're constantly in this just state of paralysis of not, against fighting against your authentic self. So it causes intense fear, the judgment, and it's just a repetitive loop. And you want to hide. Who wants to be out there in public when you're just continually beating yourself up? Like I used to baste myself in self-hatred and I didn't want to go out because I was ashamed of myself. So um it's paralyzing. So and this pattern is reinforcing that half system that you're not good enough, right? The world needs to be conquered. It doesn't, you can't collaborate with anybody because the world's a bad place. They see you as somebody weak and somebody that needs to hide. So don't go ask for help because people already think that, you're not good enough. So now, when we switch to the power two, is when we're stepping into change, right? Because power two is not controlling others, but it's that ability to act effectively and then mobilize all the resources of the universe towards the goal. So when you learn to guide this energy that's been suppressed and been poisoning you, and now you're going to take it and you're going to use that for your soul, to let your soul free and to step into who you are so that the world can see your capacity, that you can reclaim that capacity for action. And this is magnificent. And we all have this inside of ourselves. We all have this power center inside of ourselves. Sometimes we turn away from it, and we beat it down. But instead of beating it down, we can engage in reflecting about ourselves, right? Instead of saying, I'm bad, I made a poor choice, right? It's not about me. I'm not a bad person. I made a mistake and I'm a human being in the experience of life. So this allows you to be free from this mindset of shame, and it's liberating. So you're moving to guilt, and guilt is where the action and change are possible. So um, and this is the transformation when you're taking that fear and sadness, and you're no longer afraid of it. You see it and you use it, right? You use it to transform, to elevate who you are, because you're not just going through the pattern of beating yourself up. You're looking at yourself with awareness, with self-awareness, and what have I done, and what's a better choice? Who do I need to make amends to, right? So you're being an advocate for that somatic self, right? The cognitive self is saying, I'm going to welcome and validate that feeling self, the wounded child. So, and this is a new process that you're learning, the inner dialogue. And nobody says it's easy. Nobody says it's going to happen overnight, but it can happen in slow steps, and you'll catch yourself, right? I might say, yeah, I did a good job. And that other voice will say, no, you didn't. You came in last. But the awareness is there. So just keep practicing, because every time you practice, well, we're putting down another pathway in our brain. And so we want to build up that practice of self-advocacy. And so you can become your own best caregiver. So this is when the transformation comes, and you're going to own that full system, right? It's not going to be a half system anymore. You're not going to be just totally working on emotions and living on emotions like I used to, or living or shutting down all the emotions. You're going to bring those two parts together. So, and that's a lie, that you have to be stuck. You don't ever have to be stuck. You can always escape, like our other beautiful, wise speaker said, moving into the truth of the full system power. So, true strength, true masculinity is not about isolation, it's about integration, right? So Claire Zammit, who developed the Feminine Power Program, which I studied, talked about the solution to the masculine crisis. And it's the emergence of the feminine, she says, not just in women, but in the male psyche. So it's about the balance, right? Integrating your masculine energy, which is the logos, which is the logical mind, the drive, right? That integrity and the analysis, with the qualities that you've pushed aside, which is the eros, the empathy, the vulnerability, the connection, and intuition. So when you bring these together, then you can get to the full system. So in Claire Zammit's teachings, she talks about the power center, the self, and that involves self-advocacy, right? You're bringing on self-compassion. You're moving into that center where you're going to create from a state of power. You're not going to create from a victim mode. Like, I'm going to intentionally tune into the wise self that is there, and holding every ounce of power for myself before I start creating. I'm not going to just jump up and say I'm going to do it. No, I'm being intentional about stepping into my power. And so that's the first step. That's the first power center she talks about. The second one is the capacity for co-creation in all of life. The universe is working for you, opening your eyes up to how the universe is coming together for you. You might have been seeing through a filter, but now I'm going to open my eyes up to the power that has been inside of me, and all these wonderful people, right? And all the resources of the world. I'm not going to shut down to that. So then that is also power center 3, which is others. Like, I'm going to reach out to AK if I'm struggling, right? I'm not going to say that I'm going to do everything by myself. I'm going to let go of this I'm independent and I don't need anyone attitude. No, I'm going to reach out to Linda if I'm feeling sad. I'm going to reach out and say it. I feel sad today. I feel scared. I'm going to acknowledge that. I feel scared, but guess what? I'm also courageous, and I'm courageous enough to pick up that phone and make that call to Max, make that call to whoever I need to, right? Because that's where true courage stands, is feeling and acknowledge and reaching out, because the universe has unlimited resources for our potential, right? So we want to change the the this wisdom that we use as being an adapters. We adapted to the message, shut down your feelings as little boys. And that adapter was a genius, because that little boy knew that he had to put a mask on. That little boy knew in order to survive, he couldn't be crying in front of his dad, right? Because the dad would condemn him. So he did what he had to do. And that was amazing. That was a powerful survival skill, right? So that little boy prioritized control. So what we want to do now as men is to just be aware that that childhood fear and that mask we were wearing as a little boy, we can't let that run our adult lives. We want to be aware it's not serving us anymore, but we want to take that adapter power that we learned as little boys. And I say we, I'm not a little boy, but anyway, I'll just pretend here. All right. So as little boys, that skill of adaptation, and put that into, instead of defending the mask, to now use that adapter for the new mission of maximizing joy, connection, and profound purpose. So you're being an adapter in a different way of honoring yourself, learning new techniques to allow feelings, just sitting quietly. Maybe you don't know what the feeling is, but even saying, I don't know what I'm feeling, but that's okay. I'm going to just sit here quietly. I don't have to have all the answers, but what I'm doing now is I'm reflecting instead of that rumination of beating myself up. So that's the shift right there. And you're allowing that somatic self, which was used to be saying you're weak and you're a failure, that power over, you're allowing that to step aside, and you're using that power inside of yourself to support your feelings. You're using that logical mind to support the beauty of that somatic self, which is going to open you up to all sorts of new possibilities in your life. So this is when you're going to realize, like, I'm an adult now. I'm 34. I don't need to run that program of a little 5-year-old boy, right? I'm going to take that wisdom of that, 40-year-old man, and I'm going to have compassion to that five-year-old boy and say, hey, I see you. What you did was, you did great navigating what you needed to navigate, but now I'm going to help you, right? I'm wise, I'm 40, and let me run the show now. And so when you do this, you stop abandoning yourself. You become an advocate for yourself, and you get back into that power center with yourself. So that adapter is a genius, and you are going to use that wonderful skill of adaptation to be a support for yourself. And you're going to step out of that role of victim, and you're going to reclaim that power as a self author of your life, right? The creator of your destiny. And so you're going to take that logic and drive, and you're going to fuse it with connection and empathy, right? All this from that somatic system. So now you're moving into a full system of power and purpose. And man, all those emotions, yeah, you might feel them. Just welcome them, sit with them, take the breaks you need to. If you're in a relationship, be honest with your partner. I'm feeling a lot. Maybe I need to just sit quietly for a minute, and I just need some space. But communication is another superpower, and communicating with yourself and feeling yourself is so important. So living intentionally, right, is is of essence. We're in a moment in history where models of leadership and power are needed. The world needs strong men and boys who can be gentle, logical, and empathetic, and courageous enough to be vulnerable. And the challenge is letting go of this mask, but living a life of profound purpose, which is your evolutionary call. It's who you are meant to be. Letting go of the half system, which won't allow you to live in the highest vision for your career, your family, or community. When half of your wisdom, your emotional intelligence, your capacity for genuine connection is deliberately shut down. And who pays the price for this besides you? Your the women in your life, the friends in your life, the environment. The list goes on. So the truth is, the greatest act of courage is not suppressing your fear. It's choosing to bring a mature, loving presence to it. The greatest act of strength is choosing to fully inhabitate your authentic self. And this is the path to the full system. This is the pathway to true power and unlimited potential. So I'm so grateful for all of you today listening to me with your open hearts and all of your wisdom. I feel inspired by your courage and all the men and boys out there that are struggling today, but yet struggling with bravery, that they keep moving forward. And I just want to honor all of you all and all the beautiful women that are standing with all of humans in this in our human experience. So thank you.
Thank you, Marikita. Thank you for this wise words, for your energy, and for your contribution. Thank you so much from all of us. I guess it's time to move on to the next pair. Okay, and right now we have Max and Linda talking about against the norm life as a GBT man. Okay, and I already introduced Linda today, so we have not heard from Max yet. So I will just say a couple words. Max is a self leadership coach who guides men towards joy, purpose, and balance. He brings a powerful insight into the experiences of GBT men and how we can all be stronger allies. So, with that being said, Mike is yours. Take it over.
Right. Thank you very much for that warm welcome there. And this is the part in the program where we are going to have a fireside chat about what it means to be a GBTQ. I'm sorry, I'm getting the letters there. But anyway, man. And really it's about the tone that we want to set here. And it's about having a rich conversation about coming into our identity and our purpose. And so one of the questions that I wanted to ask you, Max, was what does it mean to you personally when I say becoming the courage to be seen?
I think there's so many ties to what Marikita was just saying in just now as well, which was beautiful. So thank you for that, Marikita. And it's this pull towards authenticity, this pull, this drive towards becoming ourselves on that deepest level. I think that is our work here. And Carl Jung says the privilege of a lifetime is to become who you truly are. And I think our lives are that, they are a becoming. And it's a bit like layers of an onion. We're constantly peeling back the layers of the onion and becoming. And that takes courage to do that. It takes courage to stand forth in that becoming as well. So it's not just a deeper knowing, but it's also stepping forth and presenting this new self to the world. And certainly my journey has been one of stripping back the layers and coming back more and more to the center of that onion. And I've still got lots of layers to go. I don't feel it's a it's a destination that can be reached. I feel like it's a life's work, a life's journey, which is beautiful. I think that is amazing that is the journey that we're all on. It is never ending. Our growth is infinite. There is no ceiling on it. But it is a journey of becoming. And that's certainly been my experience. So yeah, I really resonated with a lot of what you were saying there, Marikita.
So one of the things that also comes up as we're talking about how the becoming is a journey, it's a journey of a lifetime. Can you take us back before that journey really began? And, I guess from an ally's perspective, it's always nice to have an understanding, although we can't step inside another person, about somebody else's journey. And so the coming out journey is one that is full of a lot of opportunities, as you talked about, in peeling off the layers of the onion. For sure. And so what would you want us to know about that journey when we come across somebody that is peeling off those layers of that onion, and that they are coming into a place where they are getting to know themselves, and it might not be the same as everyone? How would you want us to ask you about it, perhaps?
Yeah. And it's such a big question, right? And I think it's a question that affects us all, but it's all around our sort of conditioning, how we come into this world. I think is a good place to start. I think, especially as men, we come into the world with a man box, and in that man box, what's contained in there is a sort of limited set of rules. So don't show your emotions, degradation of the feminine. So don't be like a woman, don't be a sissy, don't be a wussy, and don't be different. So those are the three main rules that we're given. And if we break one of those rules and step outside the man box, then we're cast out. Now, I grew up with two older brothers, and didn't have a father figure actually in my life growing up. So I sort of depended on my brothers for that paradigm of masculinity. And they had been fed their paradigm of masculinity through societal conditioning, the man box, right? So that was all I knew. And being different, being gay or anything like that just wasn't on my radar. What was on my radar was conformity, making sure that I'm staying very clearly within the confines of that man box, because it's very dangerous to venture outside of that. And so what happened to me was, I think there was inklings that I was different when I was younger. There were certain ways that I just didn't fit in with my sort of male peers at school and growing up. But any conscious thinking around that being related to, my sexuality was popped right down. It was repressed. It was like a game of whack-a-mole. So it's like if it reared its head, it was shoved back down again, right? So I did all the things. I dated women and had long-term relationships as well. And lived a life where I genuinely thought this is how I felt, is how every other guy feels. That it's not that amazing. It's not like fireworks. Like it's just with someone. It's a bit like a friend, and that's it. And I never really questioned it. So the repression was so strong because of that conditioning. And it wasn't until my early 20s that it started to burst out, a bit like a jack in a box, where there was like, I can't actually contain this anymore. And like, feelings started to come through and things. And but the narrative, the messaging, the conditioning was very much still there, which was you cannot be that. You cannot be that. So you have to not be that. And when you're confronted, it's a very weird experience, but when you're confronted with your real identity, and then a part of you is rejecting who you are at your core. It's a very confronting experience. And so I didn't have any blueprint of how to navigate that. And I think that's where a lot of people are at. And it's scary to be in that place. And it doesn't have to be around sexuality. It could be around anything, right? Say you're in a, I don't know, you're in a religious family and suddenly you realize you don't want to be part of that denomination anymore, or maybe you're part of an atheistic family and you suddenly realize they're actually you're religious and you want to bring that in, or maybe you're trans and suddenly you realize you're trans, or whatever it is, difference to experience at our core that we've been told to reject. When that meets that narrative, that's extremely confronting.
So at what point, when you had that, I guess, that experience where you were rejecting everything because of the society saying you needed to be in a certain place, what did you do? What was that moment where you're like, I am not gonna worry about being different. I'm gonna come out as who I am and have the life and experience of relationships that I want to have. And it's not gonna matter what everyone else is thinking, because it's more than just the personal part. Because I know that you spent your first part of your career as an attorney, and so that's a whole different environment altogether.
Yeah. Yeah. And it's interesting because you use the word sort of choice there, and I feel like it got to a point where it just wasn't a choice. It had to be lived. Had to be lived. Had to live who I was. I didn't want to. I didn't want to do that, but I had to. So I had an option of either not being here anymore or living as my true self. And those were basically the only options that I had. And so it wasn't a choice. Well, I suppose there was a choice there because I could have, you know, yeah, there was a choice in that sense, but it didn't feel so much like that. I think what carried me through was hope. So there's a charity called the Trevor Project, and they do a campaign called It Gets Better. And I saw people like me on there who had said it gets better. And so I didn't know what to do, but other than to believe them, and that little bit of hope carried me through. And I built on that. And then I started to see myself in media and other places. Because I think being gay was portrayed in one certain way on TV. And I didn't see myself in a lot of the portrayals. So I thought that's not something I could ever be. Whereas then media came about and started to show, anyone, any type of man can be gay, right? Or, gay, bi, trans, whatever. But so I think through seeing myself in media, that helped to come to the acceptance as well. So it's a mixture of that, like hope and that mirroring. So media is incredibly important, and now there's so much of it, which is great for kids growing up. But I didn't have that growing up, so yeah, that's a win, I think now.
That's interesting that you put the media in a positive light of what actually began to help you, because you didn't have any examples of someone that you could look to that was experiencing much of the same things that you could actually, because you're right, how it was first portrayed, if I'm thinking back in history when I was watching TV, and how it was brought up, how it first started and how it's evolved now, it's like it's a it's accepted. It's an accepted, normal way we are in being, and everyone accept everyone else, and we love everyone. And what better place to be than that? Because the other, where you first started out, there isn't the love and the acceptance for being different, and it's not something like you said, you don't choose it. When I was using the word of choice, I meant how are you going to respond to all of this? Because you could, choose different options based on that. But living who you are is not an option. Living who you are is something that you do.
Yeah.
And so I appreciate you for bringing that distinction there, because I hadn't even thought about that perspective until you shared that today.
Mm. Yeah, I think it's an important one. And I think it's also important to speak to, in the West, we do have access to the media in a lot of countries, right? But there's places in the world where, for example, we look in Russia, anything LGBT is deemed as a terrorist organization. I was watching a video, the news article the other day. It was harrowing, but about somebody who's basically beaten to death because they were trying to run an organization to help LGBT people. But because it's a terrorist organization, this individual was shut down and beaten to death. So there's countries where you don't have media, so you can't see yourself mirrored, and that's awful, right? That's awful to think about. So I just wanted to acknowledge sort of my privilege there of being able to do that, and to step into the world and it not be illegal for me to exist. It was a while back, even in the UK, but in some countries that's still the case. And I can't imagine what that's like. I do a lot of work, voluntary work in the space, and sometimes I connect with these people, and it just reminds me how lucky I am to live where I live. So yeah.
And we're also lucky that we have you as someone that can be in International Men's Day, so that other people can be that mirror that you're speaking of that you didn't have. So you are embodying and embracing and living it. And so, something that may have been very difficult on the onset, all the things you had to go through, and how far you've come now. I mean,
Yeah.
And the things that have changed over time. And it's most powerful. It's one of the things that I felt was very important for this day, was to represent all types of men from all different types of backgrounds. And so I thank you for coming and having this conversation, because I didn't feel like we could have this day without it.
Yeah. No, thank you for speaking to that, Linda. And I think that's a key part is those two things. It's that mirroring and the hope. It does get better. I'm proof of that. Even when I started out as a lawyer, I completely hid who I was. And when I was talking about my partner, I used to use they pronouns. So I'd say they did this, they did that. So I was terrified of anyone finding out that I was gay. And now I talk about it publicly. It's the same as my anxiety. I was terribly worried about someone finding out that I had anxiety. Well, now I don't care, because it's useful to other people. It gives other people hope that there's a better life on the other side of that. I think the more that we can do to show up and mirror, the better the world becomes. Good old Brené Brown says, vulnerability is the last thing that I want you to see in me, but the first thing that I look for in you. I love that quote, because that used to be me looking around like, where can I see me? And now I try and be that person. And sometimes there are days that's harder than others. I'm not saying that I can do that all the time, but try and do that more. And I think if we all do that more, that modeling, there'll be less loss of life for a start, but it would be a much happier world as well.
I couldn't agree more. And one of the things that I did want us to talk about here is, when you have allies that want to show up for you, whether it's friends, family members, colleagues, what is what you want to have happen in those conversations, and how do we best support? Because it's hard being on the other side of it too, because we get curious about certain things and we want to ask you, and we're like, well, do we want to ask that? Because we don't want to bring out something that's going to trigger you necessarily. But yet, if we don't ask you, then we wouldn't have any awareness anyway. So we might as well ask.
Yeah, great question. I think the world needs more allies, and it's important that we have that conversation. Then what is an ally? What is a good ally? And I think it's like anything, we can always do better. We can always be better. So it's not about being a perfect ally. It's about just showing up with support and learning And that's all you can ask of yourself. I'm an ally for people in other ways, right? And I think that's all I can ask of myself in that situation, is that I'm curious. I remain curious, and everything that I say comes from that kind-hearted place, and you just check in with that person. But I think two things are really important. I think education, because I think most of the hate in the world at the moment comes from miseducation rather than actual hate. I think that there are hateful people, and even then, I think that's to do with their conditioning, which is a shame. But if we can educate more, we can educate the world more, then there's less hate, right? Human beings don't like difference. We're tribal, so okay, I don't understand being gay because it's not me, so I'm not gonna, I don't get that, so therefore I don't like it. Same as trans, same as anything, right? But there's difference. So if we can educate ourselves and understand that actually very natural, nature is diverse, we can see a queerness within nature itself, right? It's very natural to be queer. We can start to understand, okay, well, I don't have to understand what the lived experience is like, but I can educate myself that it exists and respect that. I think that that's an important piece of this. And I think the other part is as well is challenge. So even in spaces with friends or colleagues or whatever, if you hear microaggressions, so not necessarily hateful, homophobic comments, but might be little digs here or there, and you catch on something that doesn't feel right, being brave enough to gently challenge, and it doesn't mean calling that person out in front of everyone, but it could just be pulling them side off and just saying, hey, when you said that, I was just curious about what you meant, because that could come across in a not great way to some other people, right? If more of us did that, again, it would make the world a safer place. So a lot of us don't challenge, and it can be really hard, especially when they're our friends, and often the friends don't mean it in a bad way, right? But I think it's important that we do start to challenge as well as allies, things we do here. So we're not just being allies with the community, but we're being allies outside of the community. I think that's how we create real change.
I love how you put that about when we see something like a microaggression or something that's said and maybe the intention wasn't there to hurt anyone, but it had that effect to, like you said, pull the person aside in private, have a conversation rather than just kind of letting it roll off and letting it happen. And that takes courage. That takes a lot of courage to speak up when you see some type of injustice or something that's insensitive or something that's not appropriate to do it, but failure to not do it, that shouldn't be the choice that we make, because you're right. The more that we can educate and provide awareness and then actually like step up and be that person, that is the part about being an ally, that is the one that brings about everyone coming together and existing in the same space in a way that feels good, as opposed to the other. And because all those things happening below the surface, we're not going to be in a place of community. We're not going to feel safe. And so that's so important that we do that. And thank you for sharing that example, because I think that that's a powerful one right there that we can body embrace as humans.
Yeah. And you spoke something there as well around the inclusivity point. And that's not something that we're necessarily going to consciously think if it's not a lived experience, but how can we use our language? Because language is so powerful to be inclusive. So we're talking around men, and we say, you know, um, you know, about and their wives, for example. Well, not all men have wives. Some men have husbands, right?
That's
Or
right.
if we're talking around in groups and we're asking these sort of questions, just catching our language and just making sure that everyone in the room can feel included. And that's hard, right? That's hard if we're not used to speaking in that way, because it's not our paradigm, it's not our lived experience. But again, another great way of being an ally is just doing that gentle checking with ourselves as much as we can every now and then. But it's not about being perfect, right? We're all going to get it wrong, and that's okay. It's about the heart behind it that's most important thing. Yeah.
You're right. If we worry less about getting it wrong and have the conversation to begin with, there isn't, you come at it with a good heart and a good intention. Even if you say it wrong, I think all of us can let that go because we recognize the intentionality behind what someone's sharing or asking. And that's, if we can do that, then we can do a lot of things.
Yeah. 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 Yeah.
So, as we're wrapping up our fireside chat here, was there anything else that you really wanted to share with our listeners and anyone that's on this call with us as we're speaking today?
Yeah. I think anyone who's listening to this, I've talked about this from a gay man's experience. That's the label that I'm using, but it is just a label. And actually, sexuality exists on a spectrum, right? We have people that fall in love with people, regardless of their gender, and sexual people. We have people who are bisexual, right? They love all genders. We have people who are asexual, who don't have a sexual preference, right? So there's lots and lots of different, and that's just a tiny part of that whole spectrum. And I'm going to go back to nature and diversity and how diverse the world is, but also our sexuality can be on a spectrum. So I'm speaking to one lived experience. I'm not speaking for all experiences, but the one thing we can get lost in is the language, the construct, the linguistic construct, right? That's something I struggled with because I'd had long-term girlfriends. So I was thinking, well, I can't be gay because I've been with women, right? But when I realized that actually these are just words that I'm using to communicate myself and my existence, so people understand, I then wasn't so limited by them. So I think if anyone's exploring, say that they may be married, for example, or they and they've been repressed their whole life, or maybe there's someone listening who's coming of age and they know they're different, but they can't put a label on it. Don't put pressure on yourself, right? A label is there for communication purposes, but it doesn't define you and your existence, right? And there's a lot more nuance and color to it. So forget so much about the label and focus more on who you are and become more of that, because that's what the world needs. And then the labels can work itself out later. And the only other thing I want to speak to, which we haven't talked about, is just the shame part. And Marikita spoke a lot about this in her talk in a different way, but it's really related. Just the power of shame. She said shame is the total system failure, and I think that is exactly it, and that's how I experienced it. It did feel like a total system failure. But when we bring shame out into the light, it can't survive. So putting yourself in spaces where you don't feel that shame, or you have the antidote to shame, which is pride. So that might be in a circle with other men who are the same. It could be conversations with people, watching media, listening to a podcast, whatever that might be. And the shame will slowly die, right? And we do want it to die because it's not a nice experience. And it might rear its head occasionally, a couple of times, but eventually it will fade, and then the pride will take its place. And I speak to that from an experience of having a whole lot of shame. So if anyone's listening to this and feels like they're in that space, there is hope going forwards.
Thank you for bringing the hope, Max. We're all here with you and excited for what you just shared to be viewed.
Yeah, thank you. Thank you so much for thinking of, first of all, bringing this conversation into today, because it's a really important conversation, and for hosting it and for being the great ally that you are. And I do host a free men's group, a LGBT plus men's group sharing circle, which is starting at the end of this month, actually, in November. So if people are interested, they can contact me. But I also run with some other coaches a general LGBT plus online sharing circle, which is also free. So if you connect with me, I can help point you in the right direction for some spaces to show up in and feel some of that pride.
Thank you.
Thank you, Linda, and thank you, Max, for the energy that you bring into this world. So, with that being said, let's move on to our final speaker of the day. That is Sam Pepin. Okay, Sam is going to talk about masculinity of the youth, and he is the co-founder of Core Centrica. I hope I said that correctly, but he's bringing and blending psychology, neuroscience, and marketing. So he's also a host of the Meaningful Podcast. So go check that out, where he's pushing the boundaries of human potential. With that being said, I'll hand over the mic to Sam. Go for it.
Well, thank you so much for having me. It's an honor to be here, perhaps. And Carl was cite once, I'll cite him again to begin this conversation. If a man does not become conscious of his inner world, it will rule his life, and he will call it fate. This is exactly what's currently happening with our boys today. Truly, the masculinity crisis, I believe, is a clarity crisis. It's a clarity crisis because of, on one end, perhaps when masculinity is told that it's toxic, on the other end, masculinity is told that it's dominance, and perhaps masculinity perhaps has now been weave into this narrative, political narrative, societal narrative, economical narrative also, in order to divide us. And many of young men, and I'm a young man myself, basically are told that masculinity maybe should not even exist at all. And actually, incredible thinkers such as Fyodor Dostoevsky, which is one of my favorite author of all time, warned us about that decades and decades and decades ago. One of the most relevant quote that I can think of there is the mystery of the human existence lies not in just staying alive, but in finding something to live for. And that's why that underlying reason why we do what we are doing is something in which sometimes we have a hard time to grasp. And we have a harder times to grasp because of the very nature of how our society is run. We now live in a society, a performance-based society. And I will talk about society for the West, as this is by far where most of my knowledge relies, in a performance-based society where we're more and more individualistics. Now, through the fruits perhaps of our labor and productivity, there is many of that which is causes by the natural fact that we can be individuals, we can be independent, and such thing is not only wrong, not only, excuse me, not always wrong, but what I see though is because again of this lack of clarity, there's this misunderstanding, these very perhaps lopsided narrative in which creates confusion. Now, Charlie Mungers, which rest in peace, passed away not too long ago, actually, right? Partner of Warren Buffett, for those that are not familiar with him, says that in order to understand what something is, you may want to start with what it isn't. So within this current crisis, I'd love to begin with what I believe masculinity isn't, in order for us to be enlightened by, again, what it really is or what it might be. I suppose that answer is for God alone to reveal upon us. That being said, something that I've always been a huge fan of is this concept in which it is not the man who has too little, but the man who craves more that is poor. This concept of craving approval, this concept of performing toughness instead of being is something that we're exceptionally lacking in the West. We now perhaps are constantly bombarded by narrative in which shows us what it should be, perhaps, and we have people in which instead of becoming, find their place in mimicking. And unfortunately, such a place is a very dangerous one because mimicking typically occurs when you don't understand better. And therefore, by not understanding better, you have a very hard time making analysis and therefore conscious decision of your own. And it is impossible to be a free man if you're not free of your own thoughts, if you're not free of your own ability to dissect not only life as it is, but life as who you are. And within that, going back to a very old Buddhist concept, perhaps, again, the more expensive your luxury, the poorer you will be. The concept in which perhaps in the West has been completely lost, in which perhaps now it doesn't matter how you accumulate the power and wealth, as long as you have it somewhat, you're important because of it. And therefore, power is no longer, or masculinity perhaps, is no longer something that many perhaps holds as in a meritocracy type of understanding, but in the accumulation for the sole sake of it. And what I see within that is a lack of love for each other. If our goal is constant accumulations, therefore, within our hierarchy of desires and therefore perhaps aspirations, is a lack of understanding that if we are all not prospering from whatever we're trying to put forwards, there's winners and losers. And unfortunately, mid to long term, such a system has been tried for thousands of years and always occur the exact same thing, which is a identity war, which we're currently facing in the West. We have a spirituality war. We have a war now that is no longer simply arms and tanks, but a war of the mind, a war on your attention, a war on perhaps which are the ideas, the ideology that you push forward. And depending on them, you will basically find yourself in a box which is basically exclusive and not inclusive. And that box is a box that is exceptionally dangerous. It's a rabbit hole that we unfortunately put upon ourselves and continue to do so because we are told by our tribe, to whatever box that we choose, that such tribe is the right one. And the other side must therefore be wrong. And with this disconnectivity between not only generations, youth, demographic, cultural differences, religious differences, all the metrics in which you can identify and I suppose quantify and human beings are now things in which we amplify the differences instead of the resemblance. And I am very grateful to be a very wealthy man for my age, and therefore go over the world and have again the grace of seeing men around the world. Doesn't matter if they're poor, doesn't matter if they're tall, doesn't matter if they're beautiful or not, even though I think they are. The that concept of what we want to become as men is channeling to the divine. The truth is, we want much more of the same thing than we realize. And by amplifying those differences, sometimes I found myself wondering who benefit from that, who benefits from that division. And without getting into completist, basically, a theory here, you want to ask yourself that again, people in which are divided are much easier to deceive, are much easier to control. And therefore, this war on masculinity is in many ways a war on all people, a war on femininity that needs to be preserved by the masculinity, and a war on masculinity in which need the femininity to be amplified. Within this, I suppose there's this concept in which I believe masculinity is not violence, is not suppression, is not absence, it's not bravado, perhaps, and in a boy in which wants to prove at all costs that is a man isn't there yet. And that is something to always look for in your idols and mentors, is who benefit from that. But most importantly, why? Why preaching such a message? Why dividing each other instead of uniting each other? There's four pillars of masculinity as how I understand it. The first one is direction. Again, Nietzsche, greatest writer of all time, in my opinion, says he who has a why to live can bear almost anyhow. And a boy with directions becomes a man with purpose. And direction is a combination of vision, value, and forward movement. Now, forward movement can be at any speed, actually. We like to celebrate the people in which build companies that are successful, and that's fantastic. And I love to, trust me, you don't get to my place if you don't have some speed behind you and momentum that you gather. That being said, that speed, no matter that speed, no matter the speed of your progress, any progress is a beautiful thing, and you should be happy and perhaps sometimes stop yourself And look at all you've been accomplishing. Look at all the work you've been able to achieve. Look at how you've been able to become a better version of yourself. And if that's not the case, then the reflection alone is a fantastic starting point. Now, what is vision? Vision to me is an understanding of where you are going. Now, another thing that I think is very problematic in the West as we speak is we are, through this individualistic movement, more and more consider our guide, our boss, our guide, our me. And within this occurs a major problem. Uh, and the major problem is that when you are going good, when you're doing well, perhaps having yourself as a guide is fantastic. There's no problem there because again, life is good and you are on the upwards path. When you're not though, and you're your own guide, there's doubts that start to come. There's lack of trust upon yourself. There's lack of deserving. Also, that is a major problem in the West. But the truth is, you deserve it all. The only limitation that you have is the one that you put on yourself. Values is also extremely important. To not stand for anything means to fall for anything. To not stand for anything means to fall for everything. And in the West, again, meaning where I live in Canada, Quebec, Montreal, for those that wonders, there's a humongous misunderstanding that without collective virtues winning, meaning amongst men, boys, but society as a whole, without criminality becomes contradictions. And within contradictions becomes, unfortunately, different ways of thinking in which sometimes are put against each other and suppress each other instead of loving each other. Without directions, strength becomes misuse or unused, which both of those can be critically bad news. The second thing is discipline. I'll cite, in my opinion, maybe the wisest man of all time, Aristotle. He says, we are what we repeatedly do. Excellence, then, is not an act, it's an habit. Discipline is the backbone of masculinity. I will go even further. Discipline is destiny. Again, you are what you really do, and therefore what you think about, what you accomplish is based first and foremost on your belief. Through your belief, you trigger your actions. Through your actions, you build your habits. Through your habits, you build your results. Such things is a law of the universe. Such thing is not debatable. And therefore, if you look yourself in the mirror and think that your results are not those in which you want, come back to the beginning of that chain. Look at your belief. Are they positive? Are they constructive? Are they perhaps uplifting yourself in the world? Or they're doing the opposite? Within those beliefs, then with better belief, better mindset, everything starts in the mind. You are soul and energy, my friend. Within that beginning in the mind becomes a fantastic opportunity to take responsibilities. As a man, the difference between a man and a boy is, are you willing to be responsible? Are you willing to be accountable for not only your actions, but those of your loved ones, for those of which you serve? Disciplines equals trust in self. Trust in self is acquired. Trust in self, meaning confidence, is acquired through having regular, very important, regular proof of your competence. As a man, we need to be useful. I want you to have a vision, which we already talked about, and then have a plan of actions in which you have the disciplines to put forward. Exceptionally important. You need to delay gratification. We live in a world where Instagram will show you 17 years old, which spent thousands, maybe let's say $1,200 to rent a Lamborghini in Florida and tell you that it's his own. It's not. It's not. I can tell you this as a multimillionaire. Very few people are multimillionaires. And you should not wait to make money to consider yourself a worthy person. You are worthy because you are divine, not because you make money. Many money is printed out of the sky anyway. Not the greatest indicator of how great of a man you are. And I want this to be very clear. Actually, one of the poorest. I can tell you this for a fact. I know incredible men that are, I wouldn't say poor, but that are not rich at all. And I'm discussing them that are very rich, that I know them personally. And then perhaps I stay far from them because I know the depth of their character. Again, Denzel Washington. Don't judge a man by the color of its skin or its culture or anything else than the depth of his character. Then mastery, again, Confidence is only built by proof of competence. Find those proof of competence. Find that loop, perhaps, of competence. Prove to yourself day in and day out that you are deserving, not because you're not, but because you might think you are not. And by you thinking you are not, you will project upon this world a sense of lacking money, lacking love, lacking whatever that lack is. State of lack is an energetic blockage to what you can attract. If you put into the world that you're lacking, your chances of attracting some things diminishes by a large margin. Be very conscious of that. The third thing is emotional fortitude. Viktor Frankl has one of my favorite books of all time, and he's obviously an Holocaust survivor. For those that doesn't know, um, he says, between stimulus and response, there is a space. And in that space lies our freedom. Masculinity is the ability to hold that space, not repression, leadership of one's inner world, through leading your own life to becoming better. And by the way, you might ask me, Sam, I don't know what to pursue. Pursue yourself. Pursue your disciplined self. Pursue your loving self. Pursue nothing else at first than becoming a better person. Through your abilities of giving more, you will receive more. Such thing is a law of reciprocity. Such thing is a simple fact. And such thing will always win. I can tell you this. I go with billionaires, people you would know by name, people you will be very inspired by. They always tell me the same thing. Sam, I got very wealthy by giving, not by trying to scam people, not by trying to take more and give less, by giving more. You are, my friend, a divine creation with the ability of creativity. And through that creativity, you can therefore create. And through the creations, you can therefore give. The one that gives most receives most. And such thing is a plain fact. The fourth thing is responsibilities. We talked slightly about it, but we're going to go even deeper into it. Jordan Peterson, Canadian psychologist, major fan of his, says the meaning of life is to be found in the responsibilities you are willing to take on. Responsibility makes a boy a man. The difference between a boy and a man is responsibilities. Are you trustworthy? Can we bound and seal your words? And is it reflected in your action and your faith for not only yourself and your beloved ones, but the world? Responsibility creates grounding, creates identity, confidence, and contribution. A more responsible man is absolutely needed for civilization. And unfortunately, it is a lost virtue. Now, you might be asking me, well, Sam, how do you know all this? The missing piece in our generation is mentorship. That's exactly why I'm part of this group, and I'm very happy to do this wonderful presentation. Is mentorship. It's for you to be humble enough to tell yourself that other people have been through what you've been through. And the other side of the life you want reside in the people in which can help you get there. You are not self-made. You are not your guide. You are, my friend, an actor, an agent of change if you decide so, but an agent in which we'll need a surrounding. It takes a village to raise a boy, as my mother would say multiple times. And such thing is absolutely true. And we're losing this village, unfortunately. We need to build this village and continue upon optimizing this village. A leader knows the way, goes the way, and shows the way. That is what mentorship is. Every strong man you know had someone who believed in him. I had plenty. I still have plenty, actually, and I'm very grateful for it. If boys are lost, it's because we leave them alone. They don't need perfect adults. They need grown-ups who care about them. Perfect is only divine. Unfortunately, we can sometimes channel it. We can sometimes be perfect in a single moment, but nobody is perfect but God. Mentorship is identity transfer. It's our values, our behaviors, our courage, our vision are inherited. And this is exceptionally important. So what young men needs today, perhaps, in my opinion, children have never been very good at listening to their elder, but they never failed to imitate them. And this is exceptionally important. Again, you preach by example. Sometimes you might have young people, myself, and even younger. I might be much younger than you think. That thing is very possible. but whatever age you think I am, there's obviously younger people than me, and you might not think you're helping them because they might not listen to you right away, or you might see them perhaps do the opposite, and you're like, man, I just try to show you that lesson. But I want you to know one thing. Again, children learn by example. We are, at the end of all things, animals that succeed and that respond and that react to consequence and rewarding. I want you to reward the truth. I want you to reward fairness. I want you to reward responsibilities, share responsibilities. You are not broken. You are not naturally dangerous. You are not, excuse me, you are allowed to be strong. You are allowed to feel them. You are allowed to lead with compassion and confidence. You, my friend, deserve it all if you allow yourself to think such thing. Your children's are not your children's, actually. They are the sons and daughters of life longing for itself. We are all one. And this is something very important to understand. We are all one. We're not multiple races. We're not multiple religion. We're not multiple cultures. We are human beings. We are one, Homo sapiens sapiens, for those in which speaks Latin. The motto of a healthy man for me is this one. He who conquers others is strong. He who conquers himself is mighty. That's Lao Tzu, which I recommend you read and reread and re-reread. One of the wisest men of all time, and much wiser than I am. The motto is clear directions, disciplined habits, emotional steadiness, responsible leadership, humility plus strength, service over ego. Such thing, my friend, makes a life worth imitating. Perhaps I preach forward to parents to guide their son, for a teacher to model dignity, for men to simply show up, as continuously show up will make them better and better and better. And therefore, the ability for them to give more will increase, and therefore they will receive more. Such thing, again, is a law of the universe. I will close with this. The philosopher Emerson said, what lies behind us and what lies before us are tiny matters compared to what lies within us. Masculinity is what lies within our depth, our direction, our discipline, our devotion. If we restore masculinity, we restore men. If we restore men, we restore families. If we restore families, we restore society. The youths are watching. Let's give them something worth becoming. Thank you.
Thank you. And this is the part of the program that I want to express that there has been so many meaningful messages today about what masculinity is, what it's not, but the hope of what it can be. And what I heard probably is the most strong message is that men, they already are. And so it's more about the journey to continue the becoming. And it's all about embodying who you are authentically and being that mentor, that productive man in society that exists to build healthy and strong families and communities. And if we can all come together and do that, then we all win. Humanity wins. And so that's the game that you want to win, is the game of life, the game of humanity, supporting one another, loving one another, and walking this journey together. And so, this is one of many International Men's Days, and I am hopeful that this tradition will continue. And from I guess on behalf of the Masculinity Unmasked podcast, we thank you for coming and being a part of this day. We thank you for giving a lot of thought about the messaging that you would share with us today and about showing up. And so we hope to see you again in the future. We will be sharing this recording on our channel so that we can spread the impact with the ripple effect worldwide. Thank you.